That's what happens to brats who think they're special. That is what my brother Miles said to my 8-year-old daughter on Thanksgiving night, standing in the middle of my parents' dining room, holding the two halves of her violin, one in each hand, like he had just done something that needed doing. Emery did not scream. She did not move. She stood there with her arms at her sides, her eyes filling, her mouth slightly open, looking at me. Not at him, not at the broken instrument. At me, waiting to see what I would do. I took out my phone. I opened the camera. I photographed the bruises on Emery's forearm. 5 distinct finger-shaped marks already darkening on the inside of her arm where my mother had gripped her 30 seconds earlier. I took 3 pictures. I did not ask permission. I did not explain what I was doing. Nobody in that room said a word. The ER visit was documented before dessert was served. Let me go back. My name is Darcy Langford. I am 33 years old. I am a pediatric nurse on the night shift at WakeMed Children's Hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina. I have worked there for 6 years. My base salary is $67,000 a year, roughly $74,000 with the night shift differential. I am a single mother. My daughter Emery is 8. She has lived with me, only me, her entire life. There is no custody arrangement. There is no ex-husband. There is no co-parenting calendar. It is me and Emery. That is the whole picture. My brother Miles is 36, 3 years older. He works in commercial real estate in Wake County and earns approximately $148,000 a year, roughly twice what I make before overtime. Our father, Frank, is 63. He owns Langford Hardware on the east side of Raleigh, or he did. The store has been operating at a loss for about a decade, quietly, steadily, the kind of loss that does not announce itself. It just sits in the numbers month after month until the mortgage cannot be covered. Our mother, Judith, is 61. She has never worked outside the home. She has never needed to. Someone has always covered for her. That someone for 6 years was me. When I was 27, my father pulled me aside after a Sunday dinner. He did not look me in the eye. He cleared his throat. He told me the store was not making enough to cover the house payment. He said it would be temporary. He said he was working on a plan. He did not mention Miles. I did not ask him to mention Miles. I just started paying. $1,400 a month. Every month. Transferred directly into Frank and Judith's joint account. I set it up through my bank's bill pay system the following Tuesday, and I never missed a payment. Not once in 6 years. $1,400 a month for 72 months. $100,800 poem. Paid on a night shift nurse's salary while raising a child alone. Paid without a single public acknowledgement. Without a thank you card. Without a mention at the dinner table, without my name attached to any of it. If you've ever been the one who quietly held everyone else together while they treated you like you didn't matter, hit that like button and subscribe. Miles was informed. I know this because my father told me he had spoken to both of his children. Miles declined to contribute. Not because he could not afford it. His income was $148,000 a year. He declined because he did not see it as his responsibility. He did not see it as his responsibility because it had always been mine. That was the shape of the family I grew up in. Miles was the praised one, the visible one, the one whose accomplishments were discussed over dinner, like headlines. When he closed a deal, my mother talked about it for weeks. When I completed my nursing degree, she asked if I could pick up an extra shift to help with the property taxes. My father's silence was not cruelty in the way that felt intentional. It was worse. It was structural. He sat at the head of the table every Sunday, eyes on his plate, hands folded in his lap, and said nothing while Judith corrected me, dismissed me, compared me to Miles. He cleared his throat sometimes. That was all. He never once intervened. Not when I was 12 and my mother told me Miles got the bigger bedroom because he had earned it. Not when I was 16 and she said my grades were fine, but not the kind you brag about. Not when I was 27 and I quietly took on the payment that kept the roof over their heads. Frank's silence was not mean. It was permission. For 6 years, I told myself this was simply what family did. I told myself the payments were temporary, even after the first year passed, then the second, then the fourth. I told myself my parents were proud of me in their own way, even though the evidence said otherwise. I swallowed every dismissal. I pushed down every comparison. I kept the peace because I believed, truly believed, that keeping the peace was the price of keeping the family. And then there was Emery. 14 months before that Thanksgiving, Emery came home from school and told me she wanted to learn violin. She was 7, almost 8. She had heard a 4th grader play in a school assembly and something in her lit up. She talked about it at dinner. She talked about it at breakfast. She talked about it in the car. She was not a child who asked for things often. This was different. This was specific. I did not have $1,800 sitting in a savings account. I was already sending $1,400 a month to my parents. I was covering rent, utilities, groceries, Emory's school supplies, gas to and from a hospital where I worked nights. There was no surplus. There was management. So I built one, $128 a month, sometimes a little more when overtime came through, sometimes a little less when it did not. I set up a separate envelope, not an account, an actual envelope in my nightstand drawer, and I put the cash in by hand each month because I wanted to feel the weight of it accumulating. 14 months. That is how long it took to save $1,800 on the margins of a budget that had no margins. I bought the violin from a music shop in Cary on a Saturday afternoon. Emory was with me. She held the case with both hands on the drive home like it was made of glass. She started beginner lessons with her school music teacher 6 weeks before Thanksgiving. She practiced in the living room every evening while I got ready for my shift. She was not good yet. She was 8. She was learning. She was careful with it. She kept it in its case when she was not playing. She wiped the strings the way her teacher showed her. That violin was not an instrument. It was 14 months of intention. It was the one thing I had given my daughter that was not about survival. It was about possibility. It was about something she chose for herself. Emory wanted to bring it to Thanksgiving. She wanted to show everyone. She had been practicing a simple scale. Nothing elaborate, nothing performative. She was 8 years old and she wanted the people she loved to see the things she was learning to do. I should have said no. I know that now. But I was still telling myself the story. The one about family, the one about keeping the peace, the one about how if I just kept showing up and giving and absorbing and paying, eventually the warmth would come. So we drove to Frank and Judith's house on Thanksgiving afternoon with the violin case in the back seat. The table was set, turkey, rolls, sweet potatoes, green bean casserole. Judith had put out candles and a tablecloth she used only for holidays. Miles was there with his wife and their 2 kids. Frank was at the head of the table. The house smelled like sage and butter. It looked like the kind of family you would want to belong to. Emory waited until after the main course. She was polite about it. She asked if she could show everyone her violin. She looked at me first. I nodded. She looked at Judith. Judith did not say yes. She did not say no. She looked at Miles. Emory opened the case carefully, the way she always did. She lifted the violin and positioned it under her chin. Her posture was not perfect. She had been playing for 6 weeks, but her face was focused. She drew the bow across the strings. It was a simple scale, A, D, E. She made it through the first 3 notes. Judith moved fast. She reached across and gripped Emory's forearm. The left one, the one holding the neck of the violin. 5 fingers, hard. The kind of grip I had seen in charts at the hospital. The kind that leaves marks shaped exactly like the hand that made them. "Stop showing off," Judith hissed, not yelled, hissed, through her teeth, close to Emory's face. Emory froze. The bow stopped. Her eyes went wide. Miles stood up from his chair. He crossed the room in 3 steps. He took the violin out of Emory's hands, out of the hands of an 8-year-old who was too stunned to resist, and he cracked it over his knee. One motion. Deliberate. The neck snapped clean from the body. The strings popped and curled. He held the 2 pieces apart and looked at Emory. "That's what happens to brats who think they're special." The room went silent. Frank stared at his plate. Judith released Emory's arm and sat back in her chair. Miles' wife looked at the tablecloth. Miles' children looked at their father like this was something they had seen before. Emory did not scream. She did not cry out loud. Her eyes filled and she looked at me. Her left hand found my sleeve. Her fingers twisted the fabric until it went white under her knuckles. I stayed seated. I did not raise my voice. I did not stand. I took out my phone. I opened the camera. I lifted Emory's forearm gently into the overhead light, and I photographed the bruises. Already forming, 5 distinct marks, dark against her skin. I took 3 photographs. Time-stamped, automatic. Nobody stopped me. Nobody said a word. I do not think they understood what I was doing. I do not think they understood that I had spent 6 years documenting vitals and injuries on children at WakeMed, that I knew exactly what grip pattern bruising looked like in a medical record, that I knew exactly what those photographs would mean in a report. I set my phone down on the table. I looked at Emory. Her eyes were still on me. "Get your coat, baby," I said. My voice was even, quiet, steady. We stood up together. I picked up the two halves of the violin and placed them back in the open case. I closed the latches. I took Emery's hand, her right hand, not the bruised arm, and we walked to the front door. Judith called after me. She used my full name. "Darcy Ann Langford, you are making a scene." I did not turn around. I did not respond. Frank cleared his throat. That was all. I buckled Emery into the back seat. I set the violin case on the floor behind the passenger seat. I started the car. The engine turned over with a low, steady hum. I pulled out of the driveway without looking back. The porch light was on behind us, fading in the rearview mirror. Emery sat in the back seat with her hands in her lap, quiet, staring at nothing. And that was the moment something inside me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just a clean, quiet break. Like a bone setting itself back into place after years of being wrong. I was done pretending this was okay. I drove straight to Wake Med. Not home, not to a friend's house, to the place where I had spent 6 years documenting injuries on other people's children. The pediatric ER was quiet for a holiday night. Carol Mitchell was working intake. I knew Carol. We had overlapped on dozens of shifts over the years. She was thorough. She was precise. She did not editorialize. When she saw me walk in carrying Emery, she did not ask unnecessary questions. She looked at my face, and she looked at Emery's arm, and she said, "Let's get her in a room." Carol documented everything. 5 distinct finger-shaped pressure marks on the inner forearm of an 8-year-old child. She noted the size, the spacing, the coloration, the pattern consistent with an adult grip applied with force. She measured the bruising. She time-stamped the record. She did not write grandmother's hand in the chart. She wrote what she saw. That was enough. I sat next to Emery while Carol worked. Emery was quiet. She did not cry during the examination. She held my hand with her right hand, and she kept her left arm still on the table, and she looked at the wall behind Carol's head. When Carol asked her if it hurt, Emery said, "It's okay." She said it the way children say things are okay when they have already decided that their pain is not important enough to mention. I filed the police report that night, before midnight. The officer took the photographs I had taken at the table. He took the ER documentation. He asked me to describe what happened. I described it the way I would describe an intake at the hospital, factual, sequential, without editorializing. He asked me if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. I drove home. I carried Emery inside. She was half asleep by then, her head on my shoulder, her left arm tucked against her chest. I changed her into pajamas. I put her in bed. I pulled the covers up and sat on the edge of the mattress until her breathing slowed and her face went soft. Then I walked to the kitchen. The house was dark except for the light over the stove. The street light cut through the blinds in thin yellow lines across the counter. I sat at the kitchen table. I did not turn on the overhead light. I did not open my laptop. I did not call anyone. I sat in the chair where I ate breakfast every morning, and I let the silence settle around me like water filling a glass. I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, nothing. That is not quite right. I felt something, but it was not an emotion. It was clarity, the kind of clarity that comes when you stop arguing with the evidence. I had spent 6 years constructing reasons to keep the peace, reasons to keep paying, reasons to keep showing up, reasons to keep swallowing. Every reason I had ever built was gone. They were all gone. Sitting in the dark in my kitchen with my daughter asleep down the hall, her arm bruised in the shape of her grandmother's hand, I understood something I should have understood years ago. They were never going to see me. They were never going to see Emery. Seeing us would require them to acknowledge what we gave, and acknowledging what we gave would require them to feel something about what they took. They were not capable of that math. They never had been. I was done pretending this was okay. The December mortgage payment was due on the 1st. I had been making the transfer on the 28th of each month for 6 years. Early, always early, because I did not want Frank to worry, because I did not want Judith to mention it, because I wanted the money to arrive before anyone had to ask. November 28th came and I did not open the bill pay app. I did not log into the bank. I did not draft a transfer. I did not write a note. I did not call my father. I did not call my mother. I did not text Miles. I closed my laptop and I went to bed. That was the entire action. Not a dramatic cancellation, not a phone call, not a confrontation. December 1st arrived, and the $1,400 did not. For the first time in 72 months, Frank and Judith's joint account did not receive a deposit from their daughter. No explanation accompanied the absence because no explanation was owed. The payments had always been voluntary. I had never signed a document. I had never been asked to sign a document. There was no contract. There was no obligation. There was only habit, my habit of giving, and their habit of taking. I ended one habit. They would have to reckon with the other. Within 72 hours of the police report, Frank and Judith filed an emergency temporary custody petition. They claimed I was emotionally unfit to parent Emery. They claimed the police report was evidence of instability, not Judith's instability for bruising a child, but mine for reporting it. The logic was so inverted it almost would have been funny if my daughter's name were not on the filing. Miles contributed his own piece. Within 48 hours of learning about the police report, he sent me 11 text messages. The first one said I had 72 hours to withdraw the report or I would lose everything. The second one said I was tearing the family apart over a violin. The third one said I was ungrateful. The fourth one said things about my fitness as a mother that I will not repeat here. By the 11th message, his tone had shifted from commanding to desperate. The sentences getting longer, the punctuation disappearing, the threats becoming less specific and more scattered. I did not respond to any of them. I did not delete them either. I screenshotted every single one, time-stamped, saved to 3 locations, my phone, my email, a USB drive in my nightstand drawer next to the empty envelope that had once held $128 a month. I called Sandra Owens on a Monday morning. Sandra was a family law attorney in Raleigh. She was calm. She was efficient. She spoke in facts. When I explained the custody petition, she asked me to bring everything I had. I brought the ER documentation from Carol Mitchell. I brought the police report. I brought the 3 photographs from the dining room table. I brought the 11 screenshots from Miles. And then Sandra asked me a question I was not expecting. Is there any financial dependency they might try to claim? Anything that connects you to their household? I opened the spreadsheet on my phone. I had kept it the way I keep everything. Documented, dated, precise. 72 rows, 6 years, $1,400 each. The total at the bottom, auto-calculated, without ambiguity. $100,800. Sandra looked at the number for a long time, then she looked at me. 72 payments, $1,400 each, $100,800 total, and they filed a custody petition. They did, I said. There was nothing to add. Sandra entered Miles's texts as Exhibit D. She filed for a protective order covering Emery. The custody hearing was scheduled 3 weeks after the petition was filed. It lasted 22 minutes. 22 minutes. That is shorter than Emery's violin practice sessions. That is shorter than my drive to work. The judge reviewed the ER documentation. He reviewed the police report. He reviewed the photographs. He reviewed Exhibit D, 11 text messages from a man threatening a mother who had reported an assault on her own child. He looked at the petition. He looked at the people who had filed it. He dismissed the case. Protective order granted. Emery covered. The judge did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The evidence was the kind that speaks for itself when you stop trying to shout over it. Judith's assault charge moved through separately. 12 months supervised probation. She could not be in unsupervised contact with minors. Her own grandchild was now protected from her by the state of North Carolina. The January mortgage payment did not go out. The February payment did not go out. I did not track whether Frank and Judith noticed in December or January, or when exactly the absence registered. I did not call to confirm. I did not ask. The $1,400 simply stopped. The way a heartbeat stops. Not with noise, but with silence where sound used to be. Miles showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday evening, the week after the custody petition was dismissed. I heard the doorbell before I saw him. I opened the door and kept my hand on the frame. He looked like he had been dragged through something. Shirt untucked, eyes red-rimmed, stubble heavier than I had ever seen on him. He smelled like coffee and sleeplessness. He did not wait for me to speak. Do you have any idea what you've done? His voice was tight, controlled at first, the way he always sounded when he was trying to hold authority. He did not actually have. Mom is on probation. Dad can't cover the house. The store can't absorb this. You know that. You've always known that. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. You're going to destroy this whole family over a violin? His voice cracked on the last word. Not the word itself, the space after it. The space where the justification was supposed to go and did not. I kept my hand on the door frame. I did not step aside. I did not offer him a seat. I did not offer him water. I did not explain myself. Where's your apology to Emery? Miles opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His jaw worked. His eyes shifted. To the hallway behind me, to the floor, to the doorframe where my hand rested. He was looking for the version of me that would fold, the version that would absorb this, the version that had been absorbing things like this for 33 years. She was not there. Darcy, he started. The door closed softly, no slam, just the quiet click of the lock sliding into place. I stood in the hallway for a moment, my hand still on the deadbolt. I could hear him breathing on the other side. Then his footsteps moved down the stairs unevenly, and the building door opened and closed below. The house fell into total silence. Down the hall, Emery was asleep. The streetlight cut through the blinds in thin yellow lines across the carpet. I turned off the porch light and I walked to the kitchen, and I sat in the same chair where I had sat the night I stopped the payments. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel victory. I felt like I could breathe. Like the air in my lungs had space it had not had in 6 years. Like the quiet was not heavy anymore. It was sharp. It was clear. I went through my phone. I blocked Frank's number. I blocked Judith's number. I blocked Miles's number. I removed myself from the family group chat, the one where Judith posted photos of Miles's children and never posted photos of Emery. I deleted the bill pay template that had auto-populated $1,400 to Frank and Judith's account for 72 months. I did not do it in anger. I did it in clarity. Then I closed the phone, set it face down on the table, and went to check on Emery. She was asleep on her side, her left arm resting on top of the blanket. The arm was healed. The bruises had been gone for weeks. Children's arms always heal. I pulled the blanket up over her shoulder, and I stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to her breathe. That was the first real peace I had had in weeks. I did not seek out what happened next. I did not call mutual acquaintances. I did not drive past Frank and Judith's house. I did not check Miles's social media. I did not look up public records. I turned off the ringer and I let the silence do what silence does when you finally stop filling it with effort. The information arrived anyway. It always does in Raleigh. The city is big enough to disappear in and small enough that people talk. A woman I worked with at WakeMed, a respiratory therapist named Beth, mentioned it in the break room in February. She did not know the full story. She knew the Langfords because her husband had bought lumber from Frank's store years ago. She said the store looked dark the last 2 times they drove past. She said there was a sign in the window, but she could not read it from the road. I said nothing. I drank my coffee. She moved on to another topic. In March, a neighbor from the street where I grew up, a woman named Donna Taylor, who had known my mother for 30 years, sent me a message through a mutual friend. She said Frank and Judith had missed 2 mortgage payments and the bank had sent a notice. She said Judith was not returning phone calls. She said Frank had been seen at the hardware store alone, packing boxes into the back of his truck in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. The store had not had a customer in weeks. I did not respond to the message. I did not ask for details. I let it pass through me like weather. By April, 4 months after the last $1,400 payment, the house entered foreclosure. I learned this from Sandra Owens. She mentioned it during a routine follow-up call about the protective order. She was not gossiping. She was noting, in her factual, efficient way, that the financial landscape had shifted, and I should be aware in case Frank and Judith attempted any new filings. They did not. The house, the one with the dining room, where Emery's violin was broken, the one with the table where Judith gripped an 8-year-old's arm hard enough to leave 5 finger-shaped bruises, the one with the head chair where Frank sat in silence for 33 years. That house was listed and sold for less than they owed. I do not know the exact figure. I did not ask. Sandra mentioned the sale was short. That was enough. Frank and Judith moved to a 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of Raleigh, the kind with shared laundry in the basement and parking spaces marked with faded numbers. Frank was 63 years old, his hardware store closed, his house gone, his savings, whatever remained, absorbed by the gap between what they owed and what the house sold for. He took part-time work. I do not know where. I did not ask. Judith served her 12 months of supervised probation. She reported to a probation officer once a month. She could not be in unsupervised contact with minors. Her own grandchildren, Miles's children, were covered by that restriction. I do not know how Miles explained it to them. I do not know if he explained it at all. Miles's threatening texts, Exhibit D, remained part of the public court record. His name was attached to 11 documented messages threatening a mother who had reported an assault on her child. In commercial real estate in Wake County, reputation is currency. I do not know how many deals Miles lost. I do not know if clients searched his name and found the record. I do not know if his broker asked questions. I know only that the information was there, available to anyone who looked, permanent in the way that court filings are permanent. The family dinners stopped. Not because anyone announced they were over, because there was no one left to organize them, no one left to cook, no one left to set the table with candles and a holiday tablecloth, and no one left to pay for the house where they had been held. The dinners had never been sustained by love. They had been sustained by labor, my money, my silence, my willingness to sit in a chair and absorb whatever was given to me so that the tradition could continue. When I stopped, the tradition stopped. It had no other foundation. I heard through Beth that Frank and Judith's phone number had changed. I did not ask for the new one. I heard through Donna Taylor's mutual friend that Miles and his wife had separated briefly, then reconciled, but the tension lingered. I did not ask for details. I heard that the Langford name was spoken differently now in certain circles. Not with respect, not with sympathy, but with the particular quiet that surrounds a family whose structure has been revealed as hollow. I did not feel satisfaction when I heard these things. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel vindication. I felt the same thing I had felt the night I closed the door on Miles, the ability to breathe, the quiet that was not heavy, the clarity that comes after you stop arguing with evidence you have been ignoring for years. Some mornings I woke up and the first thing I noticed was the absence of dread, not joy, not celebration, just the absence of the weight I had carried so long I had forgotten it was there. Like removing a coat you did not realize you were wearing in summer. Emery healed faster than I expected. The bruises faded within 10 days. The arm was fine. She did not ask about the violin for several weeks. When she finally mentioned it, in January, on a Saturday morning, while I was making scrambled eggs, she said it quietly, almost casually, the way children test the edges of something they are not sure they are allowed to touch. "Mom, do you think I could learn again someday?" I set down the spatula. I looked at her. She was standing in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, her hair tangled from sleep, her eyes careful. "Yes," I said. "Whenever you're ready?" She nodded. She did not ask about Frank and Judith. She did not ask about Miles. She sat down at the table and ate her eggs and told me about a book she was reading at school, and the conversation moved on, naturally, the way conversations move when the pressure underneath them has been released. I bought the new violin in March. I did not save for 14 months this time. I did not need to. The $1,400 I had been sending to Frank and Judith's account every month was still in my budget, except now it stayed. It sat in my checking account like something that had always belonged there and had finally come home. I set some aside for Emery's lessons. I set some aside for a savings account I had never been able to build. I bought the violin on a Tuesday afternoon, drove to the music shop in Cary, and brought it home in the same kind of case Emery had carried with both hands the first time. She opened it at the kitchen table. She ran her fingers along the strings. She lifted it and placed it under her chin and drew the bow across once. A single clear note that rang through the apartment and hung in the air. She looked at me and smiled. Not the cautious smile of a child testing edges. A real one. Spring came. Emery's school held a recital in May. She had been taking lessons again for 2 months. She practiced every evening in the living room while I got ready for my shift. The same routine, the same time, the same careful way she wiped the strings and placed the instrument back in its case. She was still learning. She was 9 now. She was better than she had been in November. Not perfect. Not a prodigy. Better. Steady. Focused. She played Ode to Joy. I sat in the 3rd row of the elementary school auditorium. The seat to my left held Carol Ann Mitchell's daughter's coat. Carol had texted me that morning and asked if she could come, and I said yes. The seat to my right held Janet, a woman from down the street who watched Emery on the nights I worked late. Behind me sat 2 mothers from Emery's class who had become friends over the year. Women who showed up to school events and asked how Emery was doing and meant it. Women who brought casseroles when I worked doubles and did not keep score. That was the row. Those were the people in the chairs. Not Frank, not Judith, not Miles, not anyone who had ever treated my daughter like she was less than she was. The seats were full. They were full of people who had earned them. Emery walked onto the stage in a blue dress. She positioned the violin under her chin. She drew the bow. The first note was clean. She played the piece start to finish without stopping. Her posture was not perfect. Her timing wavered once, near the middle, and she corrected herself without looking up. She finished the last note and held the bow still for a moment before lowering it. The audience rose. Every person in that auditorium stood. Emery looked out at the room, found me in the third row, and her face broke open into something I will carry for the rest of my life. After, in the hallway, she found me holding the violin case. She was flushed and out of breath and grinning. "Was I good?" she asked. "You were exactly right," I said. She took the case from my hands and held it the way she always held it, with both hands, carefully, like it was made of glass. We walked toward the parking lot together. The evening air was warm. The school parking lot smelled like cut grass and asphalt cooling after a hot day. "Mom?" Emery said, halfway to the car. "Yeah, baby. Were they supposed to come tonight? Grandma and Grandpa?" I looked at her. Her face was not sad. It was not searching. It was settled. She was not asking because she wanted them there. She was asking because she wanted to hear me say the things she already knew. "No, baby, they were never supposed to come." She nodded. She shifted the violin case to one hand and took my hand with the other. We walked to the car. The engine started with a low, steady hum. I pulled out of the parking lot without looking back. Emery sat in the back seat holding the case on her lap, humming something I did not recognize. Not Ode to Joy, something new, something she was working out on her own. The street lights cut through the windshield in slow, even intervals as we drove home. The apartment was quiet when we arrived. Emery put the violin in its case in her room, brushed her teeth, and climbed into bed. I pulled the covers up over her shoulder. "Mom," she said, already half asleep, "you did the right thing." I stood in the doorway and watched her breathing slow. The bruises were long gone. The arm was whole. The girl was whole. The violin was in its case on the shelf, waiting for tomorrow's practice. I walked to the kitchen. I sat in the chair where I had sat the night I stopped the payments. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Emery breathing down the hall. The streetlight cut through the blinds in thin yellow lines across the table. I did not feel anger. I did not feel loss. I felt the kind of quiet that comes after something heavy has been set down and the muscles have not yet realized they are free. Some doors close so better ones can open. I never regretted a single second of it. The next morning, she woke up smiling. If you enjoyed this story about protecting your children and knowing when to stop giving to people who never saw your worth, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.